Okay, Misfit. So you said that it doesn't change anything. No high-ranking public official has ever been held accountable for the shit they do. Hillary didn't go to jail. Bill didn't go to jail. Nixon didn't go to jail. And Trump isn't going to jail. You said any high public, I don't even have time in 10 minutes to list all of the high-ranking public officials that have gone to prison. I don't have time. I started at like 1950 and thought and I didn't even have time to make it to the current time. There's just too many. I'm just going to do this. Holy shit. What presidency was that under? Holy shit. Oh my. So let's just start with the first Donald Trump presidency, okay? Let's just do that. In the executive branch, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, National Security Advisor, pled guilty to lying to the FBI. Donald Trump, President of the United States, convicted in state of 34 counts of first-degree falsifying business records. The legislative branch, this is the first time. Chris Collins pleaded guilty to insider trading. Dunker D. Hunter, both Republicans, pleaded guilty to misuse of campaign funds. In the Joe Biden presidency, 2021 to 2025, T.J. Cox, a Democrat, California, was convicted of wire fraud. Bob Menendez, Democrat of New Jersey, was convicted on 16 counts for his role in a bribery scheme, including being an illegal foreign agent. George Santos, as we know, Republican from New York, he was just a House member, though. Madison Cawthorn, Jamal Bowman. These are just federal. I'm not even doing state politicians. You wanted some. I'm going to go back to Bill Clinton because you wanted to talk about Bill Clinton. 1993 to 2001, Bill Clinton. From the executive branch, Darlene Durian, Principal Deputy United States Under Secretary of the Air Force. She pled guilty to inflating the price of contracts to favor her future employer, Boeing. In October of 2004, she was sentenced to 9 months in jail for corruption and fined $5,000, which is about $8,000 today, given 3 years of supervised release and community service. CB News called it the biggest Pentagon scandal in 20 years and said that she pled guilty to a felony. Wade Sanders, a Democrat, Deputy Assistant United States Secretary of the Navy for Reserve Affairs, was sentenced to 37 months in prison on one charge of possession of child porn. He was a Democrat. Wester Hubble, Democrat, United States Associate Attorney General, convicted of fraud and jailed for 21 months. This is the Clinton legislative branch. House banking scandal. There was a House of Representative bank that found 450 members had overdrawn their checking accounts but not been penalized. 6 were convicted of charges, most only just kind of related to the House bank itself. They were all convicted. 4 Democrats and a Republican convicted of bribery, conspiracy. Congressional post office scandal. A conspiracy to embezzle House post office money through stamps and postal vouchers to congressmen. And Dan Rostenkowski, a Democrat of Illinois, was convicted and sentenced to 18 months in prison. Joe Coulter, a Democrat from Pennsylvania, pleaded guilty to 1 count of conspiracy, and he got 6 months in prison. Wes Cooley, a Republican from Oregon, was convicted of having lied on the 1994 voter information pamphlet about his service in the Army. He was fined and sentenced to 2 years probation. He was later convicted of income tax fraud connected to an investment scheme. He was sentenced to 1 year in prison. Austin Murphy, a Democrat of Pennsylvania, convicted of 1 count of voter fraud for filling out absentee ballots for members of a nursing home. Mel Reynolds, D., from Illinois, was convicted of 12 counts of sexual assault, obstruction of justice, and solicitation of child porn. Okay, let's go to George W. Bush, 2001 to 2009. Just the executive branch I'm starting with. So John Corsmo, a Republican, chairman of the Federal Housing Finance Board, pled guilty to lying to Congress. Claude Allen, Republican, director of Domestic Policy Council, was arrested for a series of felony thefts in retail stores. He was convicted on 1 count. Lester Crawford, a Republican, commissioner of the Food and Drug Administration, pled guilty to conflict of interest and received 3 years suspended sentence. Scooter Libby, Republican chief of staff to the Vice President Dick Cheney, convicted of perjury and obstruction to justice in the affair on March 6, 2007, and was sentenced to 30 months in prison. The sentence was commuted. That's the problem. Libby was pardoned by President Donald Trump. This has got to stop. The pardon shit's got to stop. I can't pronounce his last name, was a Republican administrator for the Office of Management and Budget. After an overturned conviction in a retrial, he was found guilty of perjury and sentenced to 12 months. Robert Coughlin, Republican, Deputy Chief of Staff for the Criminal Division of the Department of Justice, pled guilty to accepting bribes relating to the Jack Abramoff Indian lobbying scandal. Felipe Sixto, Republican, Special Assistant for Intergovernmental Affairs, convicted of misusing money, sentenced to 30 months in prison. Scott Block, Republican, U.S. State Special Counsel, pled guilty to criminal contempt of Congress for willfully and unlawfully withholding pertinent information from a House committee investigating his decision to have several government computers wiped. Block was sentenced to 1 day in jail and 2 years probation. Jim Traficant, Democrat of Ohio, found guilty on 10 felony counts of financial corruption, sentenced to 8 years in prison and expelled from the House of Representatives. Bill Janklaw, Republican of South Dakota, was convicted on second-degree manslaughter for running a stop sign and killing a motorcyclist. Resigned from the House and given 100 days in jail. In county jail? Fuck that. Frank Balance, a Democrat of North Carolina, admitted to federal charges of money laundering and mail fraud. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison. Duke Cunningham, a Republican of California, pled guilty November 28, 2005 to charges of conspiracy to commit bribery, mail fraud, wire fraud, and tax evasion, and what came to be called the Cunningham scandal, and was sentenced to over 8 years in prison. Bob Ney, Republican of Ohio, pleaded guilty to conspiracy and making false statements as a result of him receiving tips from Jack Abramoff in exchange for legislative favors in the Jack Abramoff Indian lobbying scandal. He received 30 months in prison. Larry Craig, a Republican from Idaho, was arrested for lewd conduct in a men's restroom at the Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport on June 11, 2007. Dennis Hastert, Speaker of the United States House of Representatives. Remember him? Speaker of the House pled guilty in court for illegally structuring bank transactions related to a payment of $3.5 million to quash allegations of sexual misconduct with a student while he was a high school teacher and a coach decades ago. Democrat of Louisiana was charged in August of 2005 after the FBI seized $90,000 in cash from his home freezer. He was reelected in the House, but lost in 2008. He was convicted November 3, 2009 of 11 counts of bribery and finally sentenced to 13 years in prison. His chief of staff, Brett Pfeffer, was also sentenced to 84 months for bribery. Now we're at the Barack Obama presidency, 2009 to 2017. Executive Branch General David Petraeus, director of the Central Intelligence Agency, on April 23, 2015, federal judge sentenced Petraeus to 2 years plus a fine of $100,000 for providing classified information to Lieutenant Colonel Paula Broadwell. Mark J. Cylinder was convicted of obstruction of justice. Jesse Jackson Jr. pleaded guilty on one count of wire and mail fraud in connection with his misuse of $750,000 in campaign funds. Rick Renzi, Republican of Arizona, 32 counts against him, including wire fraud, conspiracy, extortion, racketeering, money laundering, and making false statements to regulators. So, I'm not done. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more people just in the executive branch. Then we get to the judicial branch. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 more people. Okay? Then we get to Donald Trump's first presidency. So you said no high-ranking public official has ever been held accountable. And you said, so show me. So I think I have.